y'all. So today we're going to be learning about the Blackout Poem and how to go about creating your very own Blackout Poem. So in class, I asked you to either gather an old newspaper, an old magazine, an old book that maybe you won't be reading anymore, and to kind of page out. And I even mentioned downloading a book of a page from a book online. And that's exactly what I did for this tutorial. Is I found a page from a book. It seems like the beginning of a chapter, and the chapter is called The Twist of Fate. So the first thing I did was actually make sure that the text, the tone of the text, was what I wanted to kind of work with. So this happens to be a very dark entry to what seems to be a pretty gruesome tale about somebody, excavating or cleaning up a site where, people died in some kind of explosion. And I don't know what happens in this book. I'd actually be pretty curious to read the rest of it. But as of right now, I only have this beginning of this chapter of this story. And I kind of a little more curious as to where it goes. So the first thing I did was read it. After I read the story, I definitely found some areas that were particularly interesting to me for different words and styles of words, and how can I create a poem from this text. So as I started looking through the text, I started to underline the different areas that I really liked, specific words, and from the specific words that I underlined, I started to gather the tone of my poem from this Blackout poem that I'll be creating. So I already have this created from this first page, and I'll go ahead and read it the way I intend it to be read by the viewer. So I guess the poem would be called The Twist. Bones spilling loosely, partially obscure, gingerly crumbling down. Killed by the blast, this catastrophic explosion, merely relics of the long dead. You awaken from sleep, dripping sweat, wishing somehow the scene was shattered. I mentioned a little on the dark side. So now that I actually have my poem kind of laid out, now it's important for me to start to circle the text, because everything else in here is going to get blacked out with my Copic marker or my black marker. Doesn't have to be Copic. You can use whatever marker you'd like, but I have this rather large one, and I also have my smaller one somewhere in this bag. This is like the marker ink. Found it. Right here. But before I commit the marker to the page, I want to make sure that I circle things properly. So I'm going to go ahead and spend some time doing that. And I'll speed up the video so you don't have to watch along as I just slowly circle my different text. Also, I did make 2 copies of my text that I printed from online. If you only have 1 copy because it's a solid page or it's from a magazine or a newspaper, lightly use your pencil as lightly as possible to underline text, so if you have to erase, you don't end up erasing the ink that's on the paper. So nice and light until you know it's right, and then you can circle darker or outline with marker. So, like the saying goes. Now that I have my text squared off and I know exactly what it is that I'm going to be using for my poetry, the next step is to create imagery that is similar to this text, or shows the story of this poem. Since this is a visual art class, drawing is going to be incorporated through creating characters or creating mood through imagery, as well as our poem that we are creating. So the next step of this video will be to create these images that show this catastrophic explosion and crumbling bones, and maybe a skull, and maybe somebody waking up from a sleep, or somehow showing that imagery on my paper. So the next time I edit this video will include a little bit more of that imagery. That it completely makes sense. Once I'm happy with this, now it's the time for me to kind of go ahead and start shading all this little area in black so that it really pops out the text, because the text printed kind of a light gray. Also, I think I'm going to add a little ghostly kind of figure kind of swooping in on him, so it kind of just has a little bit more suspense, and I'll do that in a neutral gray tone that I have. All right, here we go.